the Madman! Welcome to this week's Custom Hearthstone cards. And this week we do have a few cards from the new Rusticons expansion. So let's start off with Cant Rifle for Hunter weapon, 4 mana, 4/2. While your hand is empty, this does not lose durability. So Hunter did in the past have this while your hand is empty mechanic. I actually thought it was pretty good. It rewarded hunters for being aggressive, play a bunch of cards, and then get rewards based off of an empty hand when you're top decking and wrecking. So design, 5 stars. I think that this card is well suited for Hunter. Balance it's a bit overtuned right now because realistically it could be an infinite durability weapon. Granted, you're top decking and the card does need to be pretty powerful as a result, but like that's already a strong default weapon. So balance, 3 stars. I think the durability should be lowered to 1 durability, which means that you don't get the turn of grace, so to say, of being able to attack once with it and then the next turn emptying your hand and then having infinite durability afterwards. Senjin Runt, 1 mana, 1/1, overkill, summon a 3/5 shield master with taunt. It's probably at this point that I should remind everyone that overkill only works on your turn when your minion attacks into an opposing minion, just because it's a new mechanic. The idea of the card from the designer is that every expansion needs an angry chicken, and this is that card for this expansion. In fact, this is a way bigger payoff than an angry chicken, because if you do buff it, you could generate an endless stream of Senjin Shield Masters. Kind of cool idea. Design, 5 stars. Balance, 5 stars, in the sense that I think that 1 mana, 1/2 would be actually overpowered. Could stick on the board long enough for you to like cold-blood it, but at 1 health there should be an answer to it. Big risk, big reward type card. Heroic Throw. Warrior spell, 2 mana, throw your weapon at a minion, overkill, re-equip it. A lot of people thought this was a cool idea. It's kind of like Boomerang, except it immediately re-equips your weapon instead of returning it to your hand. And that does make it quite a lot better than Doomerang. Design, 5 stars. I think it's very flavorful for the warrior to throw their weapon and then get it back, I guess. Main problem is it's ridiculously overpowered because this returns it back onto your board equipped and ready to go, which means if you had a 1 durability weapon, you could just heroic throw and then immediately attack with it. Alternatively, you can with your Gore Howl attack with your 5 durability, with your 5 attack Gore Howl, heroic throw to deal 4 damage, and then it comes back as a 7 attack Gore Howl. And also potentially a problem is with Sulthraze. I believe that would mean Sulthraze itself would also overkill, and you could attack maybe potentially up to 4 more times with Sulthraze. So yeah, heroic throw is a bit overtuned. I think that it should be 5 mana because not only are you having 2 mana deal some mana damage, on average 2 mana deal 3 is right, but you're also getting the benefit of refreshing the durability on your weapon. Quick math, I'm told there's some clever meme being used at the numbers here. I unfortunately don't understand it, but 2 mana for Shaman spell, deal 4 damage, overload 2, overkill, unlock 1, overloaded mana crystal. So it's very similar to 2 mana to deal 3 damage, overload 1, which would basically be lightning bolt. So it's a bit too underpowered as is. Stormcrack dealt 4 damage, overload 1 to a minion, but the thing is, if you want to only overload 1 with this card, you have to overkill the minion, which means you're only dealing 3 damage to that minion. Otherwise, you're dealing 4 damage, overload 2, which is extremely bad. I do like the design on it. It implements overkill well. 5-star design, and I like the attempt to meme it up with the numbers. But unfortunately, I feel like that has to go out the window. We're going to ruin the meme. It needs to be deal 4 damage, overload 2, overkill, instead, comma, overload 0, or overkill, don't overload, something like that. In that case, it would be 2 mana, deal 4 damage, overload 2, which might be cool if you're like trying to finish off your opponent, or if you want to deal 3 damage instead, it's just 2 mana, deal 3. Captain Hook Tusk, rogue legendary, 5 mana, 2/2, battle cry, summon the crew. Whenever a pirate dies while this is in your hand, it joins the crew. So, in essence, what the card is saying is, battle cry, summon all pirates that died while this is in your hand, which is probably a better way of doing it than trying to go through this crew mechanic. Also, Captain Hook Tusk should probably be a pirate. So, what are some of the problems with this card? I think it's a bit of a design limiter in the sense that there are currently no great pirates out here, so this card is currently a bit weak. But this limits the design of pirates in that they can't be too OP, otherwise this card is actually ridiculous. In fact, there's already design things in play, like Cannonball Barrage that might be overpowered with a Captain Hook Tusk into Preparation Cannonball Barrage. And there's also stuff that could happen like playing a bunch of South Sea deckhands. Sonia, fill your board of South Sea deckhands after completing the quest and then play Captain Hook Tusk and then deal 24 charge damage with your 6 summoned South Sea deckhands. So there's some problems. It's design limiting for that reason, and also for not making a pirate tag on this card for some reason. Design 1 star, and for the balance, I'm not going to attempt to set a rating on it because 1, there's a lot of pirates that are coming out soon. 2, I don't actually know how overpowered it would be in Quest Rogue with the deckhand idea or with like big pirates eventually. I just think that it's such a design limiter, and with like Cannon Barrage too, it's such a design limiter that we don't really have to think about the balance. If such a card were to be printed, it would have to be a huge mana cost because like a big end game condition, kind of similar to N'Zoth. Which would mean the balance is like really poor in the sense that it should increase in mana, but as is, it wouldn't even be played, I think, because it isn't good enough to be run in anything. So it's in a strange spot. Silent Assassin. A simple design, 3 mana 4/3 stealth, overkill gains stealth. We've had a similar card before. Lotus Assassin, 5 mana 5/5 stealth. If you kill a minion, you regain stealth. A little bit different in the sense that you didn't have to overkill, so if you killed a 3/5 with the Lotus Assassin, it would re-stealth. Silent Assassin, therefore, seems pretty on par for the point. Not that creative of a design, but simple and seems reasonable. Could even be reskinned to be a pirate if we wanted to buff it a little bit. So design, 4 stars, balance, 5 stars. Defensive Druid. Cool little Druid card. 4 mana 4/2 Battlecry, hide your hero behind a treant, swap back when it dies. You become a treant, and then your hero power becomes back scratch. 2 mana, give your hero +2 attack this turn. It's kind of flavorful of being a treant, like a 2/2. So your opponent, when they kill the treant, with dealing 2 damage at least to the treant, you'll turn back to your hero, but the overkill damage won't go to your hero. So it's kind of like a one-time shield on your hero for 2 health. So I think the idea is really flavorful. I think it's really cool. The effect looks cooler than it is. It's no ice block because it just basically negates 2 damage or 1 attack or whatever. It reminds me a lot of like a 0/2 taunt even. 5 stars, really cool design. And the balance, I think it's just too weak. 3 stars. I think it's simple. You buff the defensive druid to a 4/4. You can also use this card as a way to just deal 2 damage. So you get a 4 mana 4/4. I'm proposing the new balance. You use the hero power, and then you can attack a huge minion, which does kill the treant, but you don't take any of the damage back because the treant takes the fall for you. Priest gets a huge spell, 12 mana Shadow Word Betray. Swap your side of the board with your opponent's, cost 1 less for each minion you control. So this is a way to, in a way, mass mind control, but in order to make it even more difficult to cast, you can't have an empty board while you mass mind control. And I think that this restriction makes the card printable. Now you can play 0 mana minions with this, so I believe that this card would not actually see that much play, but it might be an interesting idea. Maybe it's good enough to consider the Wisp Shadow Word Betray deck, especially with Shadow Visions to fetch out your Shadow Word Betray potentially, to only have to run 1 copy of it. It could work, but boy, is a lot of work to pull off. That said, I think this is the perfect mana cost for it. So design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. Even if a card gets a balance of 5 stars, as a note, that doesn't mean that I think it's going to see play in the current meta. I think it is exactly where it should be printed at. A Rogue. It's a 10 mana spell. Destroy all enemy minions. Mussassinate. And probably got a lot of upvotes just because of the name, which is a nice name, I gotta admit. But I gotta give the design of this 1 star because I feel like this is not in flavor for Rogue. And before you say compare it with Twisting Nether, I will emphasize it's all enemy minions, which means you could play a tempo deck and then run Assassinate at the end. But yes, admittedly, you'd mostly be playing this in a control deck. But you could have like a big taunt and then you Assassinate them. And for that reason, I think that the card is finally balanced 5 stars. But it's just that Rogue should not have this in their tools of what they can do. Mass AoE, that's not in the Rogue arsenal, I would say. Picky Reviewer, 4 mana, 3/5. The highest cost card in your opponent's hand cannot be played. Too slow, 1 star. No, actually, I really like the card. Design, 5 stars. Balance, 5 stars. I really like cards which have interaction with your opponent, and this is one of those cards that can help lock out your opponent. Like, you can meddle with your opponent's plan, and your opponent can just try to, you know, destroy your counter plan by simply dealing 5 damage to Picky Reviewer. And the stats are fine for it, 4 mana, 3/5. You know, under vanilla stats, but a disruptive effect, which only targets the single highest card in the opponent's hand. Some skill testing elements in the sense that you play it while the opponent has 1 card in hand, and you kinda kill that card. So, cool card. Fun trivia note, this used to have my face on it, as the art. Priest gets Shadow Word Control, 6 mana. Take control of all enemy minions with 2 or less attack. So this card has some issues. Let's start with Shadow Word Horror. It's 4 mana, destroy all enemy minions. If Shadow Word Horror were in today's meta, it wouldn't be played, because when you really think about it, there's no decks out there which have a multitude of 2 or less attack. The reason why that card was played is because it comboed with Pint-Sized Potion. And here's where there's a design problem with this card. Printing this card would make it like played in Wild, and it would be really strong in Wild, presumably. But yet, in Standard, it's far too weak because you compare it with Cabal Shadow Priest, you get a 4/5 minion alongside taking 1 enemy minion with 2 or less attack. It would prevent the printing of any cards like Pint-Sized Potion in the future for Priest, which seems to be a good mechanic for Priest. So design, 2 stars. Balance, 2 stars? In Wild, there's a potential problem. And the balance of 2 stars is just like, it would never be played in Standard. It would actually need to be reduced in mana cost, but then that would just further increase the power of it in Wild. So it's just one of those problem cards that simply can't be printed. Finally, we have Gore the Briber, which is normally the custom Hearthstone guys would not put this in the custom cards of the week, and normally I wouldn't review a card like this either, but this was the all-time upvoted post in custom Hearthstone. It is that interesting. 6 mana, 3/4 Battlecry. If your opponent concedes on their next turn, add 10 gold to their account. Only counts in random matchmaking, by the way. So you played the card, and your opponent is placed into a dilemma. Should they concede to get the 10 gold? Or do they just keep playing on? Do you put the risk of putting this card in your deck, since it's a terrible stat line, but sometimes it'll give you games that you shouldn't win? Of course, the card would be underpowered the higher you got on ranking, because then stars matter, legend points matter. Where this card really breaks, though, is you could design a Shudderwock deck specifically to abuse Gore the Briber. You have your standard Serenite Chain Gang, Grumble, Zola setup, and you set it up so that you've played Gore a lot of times beforehand, and then on the typical Shudderwock turn, where you've set it all up, you play Shudderwock 10 times, and you have a bunch of Gore's effects go off. Let's say you manage to get 5 Gore the Briber effects per Shudderwock, and you play 10 Shudderwocks, so that's 50 Shudderwock. That's 50 Gore the Briber effects on your Shudderwock on that turn, which means if your opponent concedes, then they get 10 gold 50 times. That is good value. Welcome to Hearthstone's economy breaking. So, cool to see a bunch of these cards. I thought it was going to be really cool to see the overkill mechanic be designed onto cards, and I wasn't disappointed. Some good simple effects, good simple designs. Look forward to seeing more of these types of cards as we see more cards revealed.